Oi, oi, alright, how's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is Do The Review. We try and smash out album reviews every day. I say try because recently real life has made that a little bit more challenging, like my actual job and trying to maintain social relationships, those minor things. But anyway, today, at least I'm back, this time looking at the Andrew Bird album, Outside Problems. Let's get into it. Okay, so for those of you that looked at my top 50 albums of 2023 video, and it's linked below if you fancy it, you might remember the major blunder of me including the Andrew Bird record Inside Problems. I absolutely loved the album and it made the number 5 spot, which was great until I found out at the last minute that it actually came out in 2022. A true scandal for the ages. But anyway, as it turns out, Bird, the indie folk violin-based singer-songwriter and composer, did release an album last year, a companion piece to the 2022 album called Outside Problems. Whereas Inside Problems was somewhat a traditional kind of folk singer-songwriter album, the comparison I used in my review is that Bird kind of strikes a tone somewhere between the dry wit of Father John Misty and the whimsical nature of Paul McCartney. So whereas Inside was more traditional, Outside Problems is more impressionistic and freeform. This is a full instrumental album where Bird is improvising mostly himself with his violin, loops, whistles and vocals around the musical bones of what became Inside Problems. Bird himself actually describes in the write-up on his Bandcamp page that his intention was always to record Inside Problems outdoors, but was put off knowing that any unplanned nearby, landscaping, building or traffic would disrupt the sessions and cost them money. But he does explain that this process, when he's writing, is usually what he does. He'll go out into the garden, presumably, or another outside space, with his amp, violin and loop pedals, and just kind of meander for hours until he has the bones of something solid he can then craft into traditional song structures and add vocals to later. So these recordings, I believe, are what have become Outside Problems. I don't know how much of the final recordings were made outside, but you can definitely hear the birds and little touches of nature in parts of the recording to make me believe it, at least. Underneath these recordings, Bird would go on to add double bass or choir-like vocals, and the results are really fascinating, especially when played before or after the more refined versions on Inside Problems. Some songs explore certain themes and expand them so far that it's hard to immediately discern the sister track it's related to. Others, like What We Saw, take their time, but eventually you'll hear the strong, satisfying melody from Make a Picture just gradually emerge. And without words, these compositions still effortlessly conjure images for you. Mormon House Party, with its bouncy, delicately plucked progression, just makes me think of a bright, sunny day and you're like laying on the deck of a fancy boat. Maybe you're reading, dozing, or just watching the world and the ocean is like dead calm. That's something I've never been lucky enough to do, but it's exactly the tone and like vista it sets up in my head. Motif after an intro breaks into this kind of violin-like gallop combined with a bit of classic Andrew Bird whistling with backing vocals added behind the main piano melody. So you have the violin, the whistling and the vocals all at different points kind of furthering this one melodic story, and it's very insistent and gives this piece a really interesting urgency to it. Heaven's Bows sounds exactly like what it describes. You could really imagine this soundtracking the ascent to heaven if such a thing exists. There's a kind of low-level dissonance to the whole thing though that gives this more of a gritty realness to it rather than an overly cliche kind of like hallelujah. With this album so clearly centered around violin and fiddle, these types of instruments with origins steeped in hundreds of years of earthy agrarian styles, very occasionally the music flirts with this kind of like Renaissance fair vibe, as with Festivus, which typically isn't my thing. It just conjures images of people in robes like bowing to each other and saying my liege and shit like that, which to be honest is not my thing. But when you're playing in this sort of vibe, there's always an element of that, and for some reason I'm not outright put off by anything here. I just prefer the other direction. So I'd give this a solid 7 out of 10. Alright, Kotoilo Ayoko, yes, we're still going with this disastrous acronym. It stands for, check this out, if you liked, or if you like this, check out. So here are basically a few albums I think you should check out if you like Outside Problems, or if you already know Outside Problems, you should maybe give these ones a look. So obviously you got to take a look at Andrew Bird's Inside Problems and keeping on the more traditional lyrical song structures. I'd also maybe point out Sufjan Stevens' latest Javelin and PJ Harvey's new one, I Inside the Old Year Dying. On the instrumental side of things, I'd maybe look at Nick Cave and the Warren Ellis soundtrack to The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, and Blue Blue by Sam Gendel, and maybe as a bit of a wild card, possibly an album by VCR called The Chronicles of a Caterpillar. I'm including this because she's another violinist who creates music, but this time in a more jazz and R&B realm, and like Bird, I just think it's interesting to hear someone whose first instrument is violin and they kind of apply that to a traditional songwriting form and direction. So yeah, either way, if you're into this Andrew Bird album and haven't heard these, check them out, or if you've heard these albums and like them, it's just more cause to give this one a look. Some of my reviews on those you can find in the description below. Alright, let's knock it on the head then. That's what I think. What about you? Tell me in the comments below how you feel about this album and why you're messing around with all the clicks, taps and that all region of the screen. Hit the subscribe button. I'm sure it's kicking about somewhere down there. Subscribe, share some thoughts, show some love, or just hold some abuse in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers mate, bye.